Greetings from the far side of the galaxy. I'm Fury, your host the most, here to tell you everything you need to know about the Sunshine Christmas event. I don't have a good reason to delay this any further, so let's just get started with the first transient. Yasuyori. Yasuyori is a transient from the land of Wa, the world based on classic Japanese society. He is, or well, was, a member of the Warmongers, one of the 3 true guilds. He worked under Tezcatlipoca at Penitentia Academy, answering to either him or Tane Tomo. At Penitentia Academy, I can only assume that he was like a teacher's assistant, because he definitely wasn't a normal student. He literally led the protagonist's class while they were there. Right now, in the main quest at least, he's returned to Yoyogi Academy, the school focused on athletics, doing sumo alongside Ashigara. He's also one of the Akenshi, the 8 dog warriors. The Akenshi are a set of 8 canine transients from the land of Wa who don't share any blood yet have the same spiritual father. Shino, or Yatsutsufusa as he's actually called, having received a special bead from Shino's late wife marked with a special sign. The bead Yasuyori has is marked with Te for brotherhood. His sacred artifact is that tiny sword on his hip called Ochiba. The earthquakes it causes are the main way Yasuyori fights, but its true power is to reveal hidden fates. It sounds very weird, and it is very weird because he's based on a very famous, but also very weird Japanese story called the Akenden, the 8 dog warriors. Keep in mind that English information about this is very hard to find. Only the first book has been translated into English, so I'm doing my best to piece the story together. Yasuyori is based on Inuta Kobongo Yasuyori from the story. A huge man who's talented in sumo but prone to getting into drunken brawls, which ends up killing his father, resulting in Yasuyori earning a meek and passive nature. And that's all I know about him. Like I said, there isn't much English information about this book. Though we can see some similarities between the Yasuyori in Housamo and the one from the book. The Yasuyori in Housamo was supposedly bright and cheery, but Tezcatlipoca returning war memories from previous loops subdued his personality rather than the death of his father. They're also both talented sumo artists, which explains why he goes to Yoyogi. Now, moving on to his kinda sorta not really new unit from the Sunshine Christmas event. His unit is 5 stars, either attribute, 1 type, entitled the Pinata Corps Senior Sergeant. Its first skill is Festival Horse Rider, giving him up to 100 CP when appearing and CS lock to himself after moving. The second skill is Eye Catching. Eye Catching what? I don't know, because it's just called Eye Catching. After moving, he applies Taunt. Okay, that is another Taunt unit. This makes like what, 5 months in a row that we've got a Taunt unit? Anyway, after moving, he gets Taunt to himself, Tenacity to himself and allies at 90%, and removes a debuff to himself at turn start. The third skill, Lawful War Dog, when appearing, he gets Adamantine Strengthening, nearly doubling his attack as long as he has Adamantine. He then gets Guts to himself at phase start and gives up to 8 CP to allies in 1 square when hit at 80%. The final skill is Flower Lover. After hitting, he applies Crit to adjacent allies at 30%. After being buffed, he gets up to 8 CP, and after debuffed, he gets up to 16 CP to himself at 80%. Because it's necessary, I'll get into his charge skill, which attacks in 1 type range. Before hitting, he applies Crit and Adamantine to himself and gives up to 12 CP to allies in 1 square while giving them Spirit. To be quite frank, I'm a little disappointed with this unit. He is a good tank, getting Taunt while getting Tenacity and Adamantine to buff up his defense and Adamantine Strengthening to improve his attack. But your tank doesn't have any way to regen HP, and that attack boost is tied to Adamantine, meaning he'll lose it after 4 turns. Pairing him with a good healing unit and a CP battery would do a lot to give him more presence and utility. Next up, we have both Black and White Dad. Dad is from the world of Katesh, and yes, I am pronouncing it correctly, which is ruled by Perun. He's the headmaster of Tokyo's Santa School, which teaches various students how to be Santas, Dark Santas, and reindeer. But it's technically not just Dad, because there's another side of him. Black Dad. White Dad is in charge of the regular Santa courses, teaching students to give gifts. Black Dad is in charge of the Dark Santa courses, teaching students how to punish the naughty. They share the same body and same artifact, that being the magic sack with the rule of causality, giving back what is given to it. For White Dad, that's presents, which he gives to kids. For Black Dad, that's coal, which he chooses to shoot out of guns. Very based of him, I must say. Dad and kinda sorta Black Dad are based on Ded Moroz from Slavic folklore. He's one of those archetypical Santa figures that gives presents to good children. Despite being banned during the Soviet era, he still managed to become associated with their version of New Year's. Notably, Ded Moroz gives presents on New Year's rather than December 25th. There's not much for me to get into with White Dad, and considering Black Dad is a Housamo original, there's certainly not anything there. It's 5 stars, water attribute, sword type, and called the Surfside Santa. Its first skill is watching the winds. After moving, he applies acceleration to himself while applying acceleration strengthening and non-acceleration strengthening to himself. So, when he has Excel, his activation rate is boosted by 20%, and when he doesn't, he takes nearly half damage. The second skill is a skill evo, and it's called the Fiery Southern Santa, and it has a lot. When appearing, he gives up to 20 CP to himself and allies, and up to 100 CP to himself. After moving, he applies Arger to allies in a diamond radius at 70%, and burn hit units at 60%. After being buffed, he has a 70% chance for arousal to himself. If he has over half CP, he applies combo to himself, and if it's full, he applies limit at 90%. Geez, try fitting in a few more things, why don't ya? The third skill is flying above the waves. He's immune to immobility, gets up to 20 CP to himself on miss at 80%, and has increased horizontal movement. The final skill is Black and White Embracer. I feel like I can make an interracial throuple joke here, but you know what? I'm not going to. At phase start, he applies burn weakening to every enemy, making them take nearly double damage when attacked. And after moving, he applies protection to allies in 2 squares adjacent to him at 80% and charm to enemies in the row ahead at 10%. Because I need to, let's discuss his charge skill. It hits everyone on the board, applying burn before hitting, and deals nearly double damage to burn affected enemies. Dad's unit is, impressively good. And it's all due to acceleration strengthening, which buffs up his activation rate by 20%. And unlike a lot of other units, Dad can get and keep his since he gets acceleration on movement. And his burn weakening is also better than a normal advantage since it means any attacks will be nearly doubled. You can put him with units like Hot Springs Horikyu or Tadatomo to take advantage of and spread the burn even quicker. We're at the halfway point of this video, so do be sure to like and subscribe, donate to my Ko-fi and Patreon, and check out my live streams on Mondays and Fridays. Today's third transient is Ziz. She's a transient from the world of Eden, although she was tossed out into Gehenna where she was summoned to Tokyo. She and her compatriots, Behemoth and Leviathan, functioned as a garbage disposal system for Eden. Behemoth would eat what fell out of Eden and into Gehenna, Leviathan would get jealous and fight him for it, and Ziz minimized collateral damage. Thankfully, all of that is behind her, and she's now affiliated with Shinjuku Academy. I say affiliated with rather than attend because she's not a student, rather she's a teacher's assistant. Her sacred artifact are those wings on her back, but specifically her feathers. They have the ability to ward away damage wherever she spreads them. If you want more information about Ziz, do feel free to go and watch the translated Valentine's Extravaganza event because it's all about her and Behemoth. To explain her real-world inspiration, Ziz is a part of a triage of primordial monsters, Leviathan, Behemoth, and of course, the Ziz. The 3 beasts ruled the land, skies, and seas, and yet they were supposed to be sacrifices for the pious to eat on the promised day. A trait the transient shares with the myth because Behemoth, Leviathan, and Ziz were supposed to be sacrifices for Eden, but thankfully got summoned to Tokyo before it could happen. There's not much info out there on the 3 great beasts, so forgive me if this section is a little light on information. But her limited unit is called Pastorella with the Temptress, and I can actually dig into that. A pastorella is a kind of play usually focusing on a knight meeting a shepherd. However, pastorellas are also very common in Mexico. Evolving from their medieval roots, pastorellas are often held during Christmas for various retellings of shepherds following the Star of Bethlehem to see baby JC. Considering how the event is built around Izamna from the Mexican world of El Dorado, it makes a lot of sense. Moving on to her unit, it's 4 stars, fire attribute, and sword type, and it's titled the Pastorella with the Temptress. Her first skill is Curtain Raiser. At phase start, she pulls every enemy on the board by 1 square at 80% and before hitting applies Dazzle at 70%. The second skill is a skill evo, and it's titled the Shepherd of Noche Buena, meaning the Shepherd of New Year's Eve. After being buffed, she gets up to 6 CP to herself at 90 when hitting, has a 40% chance to apply charm behind hit units, and gets glint when appearing. The skill evo adds evasion to allies and 3 squares behind her if her CP is max at 90%. Recovery to allies in 1 square after hitting at 60% and healing up to 1500 HP to adjacent allies at phase start at 100. The third skill, flying around the stage, after being buffed, she gives up to 200 HP and vigor to allies on her left and right at 70% and gets increased horizontal movement. The final skill, Great Bird's Cradle, makes her immune to drain and obstruct while giving her an advantage to dazzle. Ziz's unit is on the better half of OK. Her ability to apply Dazzle and her advantage to it is good, alongside having some decent buffs to adjacent allies. Her horizontal movement bonus and slash type will definitely help bunching up your units together on those long stages to get those adjacent buffs. And if you're playing on one of those narrow stages, there are better supports that aren't limited to sword type range. But if you want to make her work, just toss a dime a dozen Dazzle unit onto a team with her. Alice, Sandayu, Kirito, and Amdusius are a few that come to mind. Now for the guy this event is all about, Izamna. He's a transient from the Mexican world of El Dorado, and we actually know a fair bit about his past. We know that he was quite close to El Dorado's exile, Quetzalcoatl. That's because Ket and Izamna are brothers, meaning he's also related to Xolotl and Tezcatlipoca. Izamna and Ket talked a lot about the nature of El Dorado's rule of sacrifice, and Izamna has to wonder if he had something to do with Quetzalcoatl leaving. In Tokyo, he's a teacher at Akihabara Academy, the school focused on creative endeavors. We know he teaches Kuniyoshi, Benton, and Lick, to name a few students. Fittingly enough, he's also a member of the Akihabara Creators, the guild that's also focused on creative endeavors. If you want to know more about Izamna, feel free to go through the Sunshine Christmas event. It's the event being translated right now, so enjoy it. Regarding his inspirations, he's based on the Mayan figure of the same name. Despite Izamna being an important god in the Mayan pantheon, not much pre-Columbian information is known about him. He was a god of the sky and a creator god who gave the Mayan knowledge of corn and, more importantly, astrology, helping them create their calendar system. Izamna was depicted in many ways, sometimes as an old man dressed as a priest, sometimes as a bird, and sometimes as a lizard. His chart skill references another god, Kinekahau, who is thought to be an aspect of Izamna himself. The fact that he is a creator god explains why he's a member of the Akihabara Creators. And if you look at his wizard outfit from the Valentine's Fantasy event, you'll notice the star patterns, a reference to the fact that it was Izamna who taught the Mayans astrology. Moving on to his unit, it's 4 stars, fire attribute, and none type, entitled the Dragon Elder. At phase start, he gives himself defense up, at turn start he gives himself tenacity at 80%, and he has freeze weakening when appearing, decreasing his activation rate by 50% if he's frozen. Good lord! Might as well just have him die if he ever gets freeze. The second skill is dedicated to arts. After moving, he applies spread buff to allies in a diamond radius while removing all buffs to himself. He also gives up to 800 HP and loses 1000 HP to himself. The third skill is Instiller of Inspiration. At phase start, he applies glint and concentration at 190% proc respectively, and on miss has a 90% chance for glint. The fourth and final skill is Warm-Hearted Sage. On miss, he applies remove debuff to allies, and once square at 80, applies null debuff to himself at 90 and increases his own CP by 14 at 70%. As a unit, Izamna is once again on the better half of okay. The idea is to move him on that first turn and then have him sit while surrounded by your other units. That way, you get those good phase start buffs and he can then start applying his on miss buffs. Just don't take him onto a stage with freeze. Otherwise, he'll fall down dead doing the Family Guy pose. I do like how his skill list is indicative of his nature, sacrificing everything and giving it all to his students. Pair him up with some good healing units to offset the damage loss from having him move. Nourishment is my first choice since it's so widespread on units like Shoji, Shinong, and Kimun Kamui. The final unit we're covering today is Shoji, and oh wow, what did he do to make y'all hate him? What is this boy, chopped liver? Anyways, Shoji is a Tokyoite, meaning he was born in Tokyo. He goes to Shinjuku Academy, but is a member of the Oyama Missionaries, cooking for their non-profit organization to help stray transients. His artifact is a cookbook from ancient Rome. Yes, ancient Rome, which is really weird since usually artifacts come from another world, not our own. It has the ability to turn love into magic and imbue it into his dishes so they can heal wounds and things of that sort. The title of his short skill, Feast of Apicius, is a reference to the real-world book simply called Apicius. It's one of the first cookbooks, and it was, like his research file says, authored in ancient Rome. Despite the name of the book quite literally being their name, we aren't quite sure who wrote it. One of the most likely candidates is Marcus Gavius Apicius, a Roman gourmet who lived in the 1st century. It's actually a very important historical text for getting an idea of what people ate in ancient Rome. What else can I say to fill out this section? Oh, in his regular 4-star art, we actually get a very good look at his sacred artifact and summoner's mark. It's at the center of his chest, and it takes the appearance of flames in a frying pan. Since I don't think it's possible for me to stretch out this section any further, let's just get into his unit. It's 4 stars, either attribute and bow type, and it's titled Creating a Delicious Ring of Happiness. Its first skill is likened to Sage's, applying blessing and protection to himself at phase start. The second skill has a skill evo turning into 3-star Padrone. He applies blessing strengthening to himself and allies when appearing, doubling their attack. Before hitting, he gives up to 6 CP to adjacent allies and has an 80% chance for drain to enemies. And the final part is, well, a headache. Basically, he applies crit to allies at 90%, cycling clockwise to adjacent allies once a turn. The third skill, Chef of Shunsai, gives him an advantage against blessing and null debuff to himself at turn start at 90%. And the final skill, Peerless Taste Tester. When hit, he has a 30% chance to give up to 300 HP to adjacent allies, after being buffed to 40% chance to apply blessing in the same range, and up to 10 CP to himself. Shoji's unit is hard carried by that blessing strengthening. While Shoji isn't that good at spreading blessing, there are tons and tons of units who can give it to themselves or others. Like seriously, look at this list. Take your pick of transients, put them on a team with Shoji, and watch those damage numbers skyrocket. The units for this event are so weird because usually there's at least a scale of good to bad, but not this time. Dad is great and everyone else is just good enough to stop me from calling them mid. Not bad units by any means, and Ziz, Shoji, and Izamna are better off for it. A shame that the most wanted unit, Yasuyori, is just above okay. I don't have much to say, so why don't you like and subscribe while I start our Patreon shoutouts. For our 3 stars, we have special thanks to 87 Werog, Deku, Zora Chow, Tron, Garen Lefay, Dragon King Yura, Unknown RC, Lightning Shadow, and Kayun. For 4 stars, we have Miki Moon and Miko, the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. And for our Super D-Tuper special 5-star shoutouts, we have... First, Vanilla Flower, the King of Puppets. Then Poor Mage, the corrupted parade master, followed by Hodari Lion, the king's flame. Next, Kai King 64, the awakened god. And finally, Mahagasaur, the nameless puppet. Thank you for watching. Do be sure to like, subscribe, and donate to my Ko-fi and Patreon. As always, this is your host Fury signing out.